All right, here's our video on food to energy, living environment regions, the fourth video we're doing. So we're going to see how food is converted to energy in the body. In the last video, we were talking about carbohydrates, and we'll still talk about complex carbohydrates. So let's get our pen going. And why don't we use blue, starting with blue today. So just a review on carbs. Remember, the carbs are the primary fuel the body wants. The body prefers carbohydrates, right? And the reason why is because of glucose. And we'll talk about glucose throughout this video. So again, it is the primary fuel for the body. Primary fuel for the body. There we go. And it's the primary macronutrient. Macronutrient. All right, so we talked about macronutrients last time. Let's see if we remember them all. We have our carbs, right? Our carbohydrates. What do you think the others are? Right? There's fat or lipids, which we'll talk about in other videos. Our friend protein. A lot of people have their protein shakes. There's other ones too, right? We didn't talk about these in the other video, but there's also vitamins, right? Your Flintstone vitamins. There's also minerals. We need minerals. And fiber. And of course, water. Dihydrogen oxide, H2O. Now, in the last video, we also talked about nucleic acid. And there is an argument of whether nucleic acid is a macronutrient. It is definitely, in some textbooks, it is written down as a macronutrient, but it is not an energy source, but that is debatable. Say that 3 times. And so again, I'm talking about DNA, right? DNA, nucleic acid, RNA, and so forth. But the ones that supply energy for us are right here. Our carbs, our lipids, our protein, our vitamins, minerals, fiber, and our water. Now, does water give us energy? But it's needed. It is something the body needs. Well, the primary ones are right here. These are the ones that are going to give us our energy source. And so we're talking about carbohydrates because of the glucose. Now, if you're not using carbs, we're going to talk about that in another video of what that is called. All right, so let's just clear this out. Change the pen to red. And let's talk about glucose. This is the star today, glucose. And all glucose is, it's sugar, right? We know it's sugar. It's also called, some textbooks have it as dextrose. And here is the formula. So it's going to be 6 carbon molecules right there. What do you think the H is? Hydrogen, right? 12 hydrogen, and the O for oxygen will have 6 oxygen molecules. So this is glucose. This is the chemical formula you'll see. So basically, glucose is going to enter our bloodstream, and that's when the whole process starts. So this is a 1 glucose molecule, which again, it's a sugar, and it's also, we'll put another arrow here, it's a monosaccharide. Mono means single. And let's write that down. Saccharide. See if we can fish it. Yeah, that's a new word. See if we can fit it. That's what I'm talking about. And it looks like, yes, we can fit it. There it is. Monosaccharide. Glucose. Monosaccharide. And of course, there's other sugars and carbohydrates, right? There's also fructose. We'll change the pen. Use a little green there. All right, there's fructose, which we said comes from fruit. Fructose. That's an easy one to remember. And there's galactose. Now, these are all monosaccharides. There's other sugars like, lactose and so forth that I talked about in the last video. But this, very simply, all other sugars like galactose and fructose, they must be converted first into glucose. The body wants glucose. That's what it wants. So if fructose enters your body, it must be converted first to glucose. And we'll talk about how that is converted and maybe some of the problems your body may face in other videos. But let's just stick with glucose because it is the one the body wants. All right, so here's a picture of glucose entering the bloodstream. So when glucose, and we're going to talk about ATP in a minute because that's what we're really looking for. The body's looking for. That's the energy currency we'll talk about. So glucose enters the bloodstream, and let's get our pen working here. Right, so it enters the bloodstream, and that's when the pancreas, our organ, right, of the pancreas, is going to release something. What do you think it's going to release? The pancreas is going to release insulin. There we go. It's going to release insulin. So that's the big thing. Again, glucose enters the bloodstream, the pancreas is alerted, and it releases insulin. And this is vital. And very basically, let's just make a cell. And we're talking about humans here. We're talking about in our cells. Remember, we have like 30 trillion cells. So, right, we have 30 trillion cells. But let's say, this is a cell. We don't know what's happening here, whatever. So the insulin is going to, let's just say there's a receptor here. And let's just say these green dots are insulin. And insulin is going to attach itself to the cell, and it's going to cause a reaction. So here's the insulin. And let's just say the blue is the glycose. Why not? Let's say it's all over the place here. So this insulin is going to attach itself to the cell, and it's going to cause a reaction here. And this thing right here is called GLUT4. It's a GLUT4 molecule. And this GLUT4 molecule, which is a transporter, it's a glucose transporter 4. That's what it's actually called, glucose transporter. Sounds like something from Star Trek, right? The glucose transporter 4. So insulin attaches itself to the cell. This GLUT4, this glucose transporter 4, will head to the plasma membrane. And basically, it allows all this glucose to enter the cell. That's really the basics of how glucose enters our cell. So again, just to review, glucose enters the bloodstream, the pancreas is alerted, and it releases insulin. Insulin attaches itself, right here, it's attaching itself to the cell, and it is triggering this GLUT4, this glucose transporter 4, to get to the plasma membrane. Let's call this the plasma membrane, to allow the glucose, we'll put arrows here so we know where we're going, the glucose to enter the cell. And there's many steps after that where glucose will be turned into ATP, which is our energy source, ATP. All right, and here's a better picture of it. All right, so you see that key right there. It's not really a key, right? But it is the insulin, which is allowing, right, the GLUT4, and let's get our pen going there. Say this right here. This GLUT4 is going to attach itself to the membrane, and here comes the glucose in. Like, yay, we're allowed in to the ride. Now, once in the cell, let's get a better picture of that. Right, here's a good picture. Let's change the color. So now we're entering a stage called glycolysis. There it is, glycolysis. And so here you can see this receptor right here with the GLUT4 is going to attach itself to the cell membrane. Right over here, the glucose enters the cell. Now, once in the cell, glycolysis, right? Let's that I there, glycolysis. And there's many steps that go on here, but let me write the chemical formula of what is actually happening here. Let me just write that a little better. Change the color. Use purple for that. All right. So, and by the way, this is exocytosis. Exocytosis, we'll circle this. Exocytosis is just when this GLUT4 will attach itself to the plasma membrane and glucose enters the blood. Enters the cell, not the blood. It's coming from the blood. So the formula we said for glycolysis, all right, this glycolysis, right? There's glycolysis. Here's the formula. This is basically what's happening. We have our Oops, made a slight happy accident there, as Bob Ross would say. Okay, let's fix that. So we have get our pen going again. Molecule here, our 6 carbon, our 12 hydrogen, and our 6 oxygen. We're going to add that to 6 O2 molecules, right? So this is glucose. This is our glucose. This is oxygen, right? This is what we breathe. We breathe in O2. And it yields, that's what the yield symbol means. It makes, let's see if we can fit it on here. It's going to make our 6 molecules of CO2, which is carbon dioxide, plus it's going to make 6 molecules of H2O, which you should know, dihydrogen oxide, which is water, plus it gives us our ATP. This is our energy currency, ATP. And let me write that over here. It's adenosine triphosphate. ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Let's write it. Adenosine, just keep saying it, right? And you'll get it. Adenosine triphosphate. I mean, in high school, you're just going to say ATP anyway. So just remember, this is the energy currency. This is what we're all, well, not we're, but our body is trying to create for energy. And that's just very simple process of how glycolysis works. Here is the formula, chemical formula, what it yields, and we get ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, there's many steps ahead. So I will talk about more steps in glycolysis because there's so much more steps involved in this. But this is just a basic video. But another question to ask is, what if we didn't have carbs? What if we were not eating carbs? And that's what this is called here. It's gluconeogenesis. Just break it down. We should have our pen ready, right? Gluconeogenesis. It's basically using proteins or lipids for fuel. And we'll talk about that if you're not eating carbs. Now, this is not a health video, but basically the body does prefer carbs as its fuel source. But if you don't want to eat carbs, and a lot of people are doing these diets without carbs, and I just want to say be careful about that. It's not a health video, but just be careful about that. But we'll talk about that in the next video with gluconeogenesis. And then we'll also talk about more about glycolysis. All right, great job.